Looks like we're live there. Awesome. Okay. Well, hello everyone. Illinois, Midwest Millennial here again. Today we're continuing something new. For a long time on this page, we've talked about Illinois politics. So again, we're going to be talking directly with the people who want to lead this state. So the goal again here, it's very simple. Give Illinoisans the chance to hear directly from the candidates who want your vote. So today I'm joined by no other than Ted Dabrowski himself, the president of WirePoints. Thank you, Ted, for joining me.
Former president.
And I'm not really hearing you on my side, so I hope the audience can
Okay.
hear you. Oh, I am hearing you. So,
All right. Yeah.
yep, and I am getting the audio
Good.
capture.
All
Sorry
right.
about
And
that.
I just said former president of WirePoints
Oh,
because I'm no longer there. Yes.
okay. Former president of
Mhm.
WirePoints. Okay. All right. So, with no other ado, Ted, for Illinoisans who may know you or have heard of your name, could you maybe introduce yourself and kind of maybe tell people who Ted Dabrowski is?
Yeah. Well, Justin. Thanks for Dustin. Sorry, Dustin. Thanks for holding this, and I appreciate it. And thanks for letting me talk to your community. Yeah. So my name is Ted Dabrowski, and I'm running for governor. And I'm under the contention that, man, this state should be a top 5 state. We should be competing with Tennessee and with Florida and Texas and North Carolina for growth, for economic growth, for job creation, for wage growth. Gosh, I mean, we have all the assets to be one of the best states in the country. But under Governor Pritzker and the supermajority Democrats, they've made a mess of this state. They run it, they control it, and they've controlled it for a long time, with except the brief Bruce Rauner 4 years. They've been in control. And so when you look at the highest property taxes in the country, the second highest gas taxes, when you look at the crime, 14 years in a row, Chicago is a murder capital of the country. When you look at the outmigration, they own it. And if you want change, then you've got to take out Governor Pritzker and, of course, start working on getting rid of these supermajorities in the legislature. And so I'm running because I want us to be a great state. I'm the son of immigrants. My father escaped from communist Poland, came to Chicago, came to Illinois. My mother was a 19-year-old who left Ecuador, came to Chicago, came to Illinois. And it was here they built their American dream. And when they came here, just a few decades ago, this was the beacon of opportunity in this country. It's amazing what Illinois was and what Chicago was to people from around the world. And so I want us to get back to being that beacon again. And that's the big battle we have. By the way, I always have to say my parents came here legally and they became U.S. citizens, and that's an important part. We were assimilators. My parents said, "You're going to learn English. You're going to be great at speaking English." Education was key. They helped me get educated. I finally listened to them, educated myself, and I ended up having a national career, international career. I got to work with Citibank in Mexico for 6 years, in Citibank Poland for 9. So I've had a great experience. And the last 15 years, I've been dedicated to public policy and fixing this state. I've been with Illinois Policy Institute and WirePoints, and my goal is to make the state better. I don't like where we're headed, and so that's why I'm jumping in to lead this state.
That's great to hear. And obviously you have a very big background with, finances. I think you're very critical on good policy, bad policy. What do you think kind of some of those attributes would be like that would be good to carry in, or how those could apply to being the governor of Illinois?
I think I'm the best suited for being governor, and here's why. For more than 18 years, I've been studying public policy focused on Illinois, not federal, not international, Illinois, and so I know where the bodies are buried. I know the issues. I've talked to grassroots groups, so I feel I have a really good feel for what Illinoisans feel. I've testified in legislature. I've done all the research. My research, I've been trusted. I'll tell you the example of uh, why it's important what I've done. I've been doing the research. I've published all kinds of facts. I've published all kinds of different messaging around those facts, to the point where national media would grab my stuff and publish it. Wall Street Journal being the best example. At the beginning, we would talk. They would want to understand what I'd written about and why I wrote it and what it meant, and they would publish it in their editorial pages. After a while, I would just wake up one morning and there's our stuff in the Wall Street Journal right there, in the lead editorials or on the editorial page, and it's because they trust us. And so that's something that I value a lot, and that we do work that is credible, trustworthy, and so I come in day one and I'm ready to work on the problems. I don't have to pretend like I'm going to be Doge. When I come in, it's what I've been doing for a long time, so I can go immediately start negotiating with legislators. I know the issues by different districts, whether it's schools or taxes and all that, and I have that ability to negotiate and frankly just work and expose what's happening. Now, nobody will be able to expose things the way I will, which is a key starting point.
No, yeah, I totally agree. I think that you definitely have that background that people might not be well aware of, but something like that, it really does. Illinois, a lot of the people don't maybe not go and read all the page by page for every audit or whatever, but I believe the last one that was just posted was like 2023. So we don't even have an audit for 24, yet alone even what we spent last year. And just in like 2023's report, I think there was like 35 discrepancies. And, it's, maybe one or two, but 35, and, there's been a lot of hype too, especially around like the, childcare and stuff like that in Minnesota. If you were to actually read some of those discrepancies, 10 of them alone were just on those departments that manage those. So what would be maybe, if you were elected governor, would you maybe, for say, open the books and definitely maybe welcome in the federal government to maybe take a peek, or maybe even, invite, for instance, it's been said that it's going to cost about $4 million in 4 years to do an actual real forensic audit of Illinois. So what if you were elected governor, what would you do to maybe give that transparency to Illinoisans? Like, here's your $59 billion and here's what it's being spent on.
Oh, that would be, and again, I say I'm the best qualified to do that. Not only have I done the public policy for the last 15, 18 years, but I ran big parts of banking businesses. So I'm budgets. I ran the balance sheet of Citibank in Poland, an $8 billion balance sheet. So this is what I've been doing for my life. So when you combine that experience with the public policy experience, I'm exposing on day one, because that's what we owe Illinois. Illinois need to know where their money's going. I just held a press conference about 3 weeks ago on this Minnesota style spending in Illinois. I can't prove if there's any fraud, because I don't have access to that. But what I can prove, and what I did prove to reporters, is the massive increase in spending that we've seen on the same line items that are in trouble in Minnesota: child care services, home services. If the budget grew by 40% in the last 7 years under Pritzker, these line items have grown 8 times faster. So massive increase in spending. Pritzker owes us, given what's happening in Minnesota, he owes us to say, hey, I've done an audit of these numbers. Everything is good. And then would be happy with that. Maybe we would, maybe we wouldn't. But he owes us that explanation. He hasn't given it to us. As your governor, I will tell you exactly what's happening, because it's not my money, it's your money. So and that's what I've been doing again for the last 15 years. So people could count on me on that. Just if they Google Ted Dabrowski and wire points, you'll see that's what I've been doing. But now I would have the power of being the governor, and exposing it in a full way.
And a lot of people will say, well, you're elected governor. Illinois has let's face it, Illinois has a Democrat problem. The House is ran by Democrats, the Senate's ran by Democrats, the governor is a Democrat. So, with you being elected, say, obviously a Republican governor, what would you do to maybe work with the Democrat legislatures, if there, wasn't a chance by maybe other House seats or other Senate seats that were flipped in the, exchange with your seat being flipped as well?
Well, I think exposing the data is a starting point, and just telling the truth and showing the facts. Making it difficult for anybody to kind of hide behind rhetoric, right? So if we see that we have line items that are exploding, then we have to answer, why are they exploding? Should they be that big? Are we doing things that we shouldn't do as a government? I think that's the real starting point. You know, things that we shouldn't be doing, well, we should stop doing them, not just cut them 5%. Things that we should be doing, maybe we should be doing more of. But what we need to do is the starting point is here's where our money is, here's where it's going, and then we start asking why. Um, and things like, the most units of government is something I talk about a lot. We have the most units of government in the country. We have to ask ourselves why. I'll give you the example. School districts. Florida has 74 school districts, one per county and then a couple extra. One per county and a couple extra. We have 850 school districts. That's what is that, 11, 12 times the number of districts. Why? Why do we need that many bureaucracies? And many of them are overlapping, duplicative. They should be gotten rid of, or somebody needs to make the case why those are special and should be kept. But that's the kind of stuff we need to look at. We've had massive administrative bloat. Expose it. We see that in our schools. We see that in universities. In schools, our population of students is shrinking. The number of administrators is spiking. Why? They can't defend that. We'll have to then, of course, go negotiate with the Democrats. They control things. But I think with common sense and exposure, public exposure, people knowing it, we can negotiate some things in our favor.
Yeah, and talking about people, recently, over the past couple of years, there's been a big migration out of Illinois. And it's blatantly obvious. There's been bad policy. There's been just the high property taxes that have been affecting people. Just recently, I saw there was like a report. It was like 80,000 people have been recently documented that have left the state of Illinois. So
Yeah.
my question, like on those circumstances, what will make Illinois more business friendly? And I know property taxes are a big issue. We'll definitely
Mhm.
get into that. That's definitely a topic that we need to talk about. But what does Illinois need to do to become more business friendly?
I think it's a cultural change, and that's the cultural change I want to bring in. Uh, in the same way that we don't trust our government, people around the country, they look at Governor Pritzker, they look at Brandon Johnson. And of course, if they're on the extreme left, then they like what they see. But most people who are common sense see we're losing people. When you lose the Caterpillar headquarters, when you lose the Boeing headquarters, when you lose Citadel, when you lose Morton Salt, Tyson Foods, it's horrific. I mean, who would think that out of this amazing, great state we would lose companies like that? But people know it. Warren Buffett, right, one of the biggest investors in the country, one of the wealthiest men in the country, he said, I will not invest in Illinois because there's so much pension debt there that they'll be coming after me for the next 30 to 40 years with higher taxes. That's the reputation we have, the worst credit rating. So we have to change that reputation. We have to show that we're going to do some big things, that we're going to be open, transparent, honest. And the minute I get in and I start showing the transparency and the professionalism that we should have out of government, the fiscal responsibility that a good Republican governor should have, then we're going to start getting respect again. They're going to say, I trust this state. I will come invest in it. But right now, they're leaving the state. They don't trust Pritzker. They certainly don't trust Johnson, right? They are scared of Brandon Johnson. They're not going to invest here. So we have to change that mentality. And I would do that with transparency and then a couple of big actions, which we can talk about.
Right. Well, we can really get into the property tax thing. It's really, honestly, I feel like that's definitely, the elephant in the room, I guess you could say, when it comes to the election. You've seen it. I think a lot of Illinoisans seen it on the news. They were burning property tax bills in
That's right.
Chicago. No, nobody's should be, everybody should be aware too, specifically a lot of South Side residents in the city of Chicago have had 100% increases on their property tax
Yeah.
bills.
Doubling. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people publicly post a lot of their bills, and they were showing like $67,000 increases. How could you
Wow.
expect somebody to pay something like that? Like, I can't go to my work and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna need about another $6,000 a year because my
Right.
property taxes went up."
Yeah, and in the average, so if you look at a couple of those neighborhoods like Englewood and Lawndale, I can't remember which precisely they were, but the average tax bill went from 2,000 to 4,000. A $2,000 increase for people who are low income. You know, Where do you get that money from? And it's sad, and that's why they're burning them. And they're right. But listen, it's not just there. When I went to Southern Illinois, and I've been there many times recently, but I spent a week down there. And if there's one issue that came up the most, it was that property taxes. And it's the same thing in Central Illinois. It's the driver across everything. Why do we have the highest property taxes in the country? There's no reason for it other than we have massive government bloat, and it just sucks up everybody's money. And that's what we have to reverse. And that's going to be a big fight, right? It's going to be a big battle.
No, yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, it's you know, a lot of people too, they property taxes, they go everywhere. Your money a little bit goes here, a little bit goes there, and a lot of it goes to the school districts.
Mhm.
So, with that being said, there obviously needs to be a lot of reworks, a lot of tweaks and stuff like that. What could we do? Nobody wants to take money from the schools, obviously, and nobody wants
Yeah.
to see that. If anything, we should be putting more money because our children are our future. Education is our future, definitely, in my opinion. But what could we do to address this property tax issue?
Well, yeah, I think we have to be careful saying we should put more money into education. We are massively spending on education. The question is, where does it go? Um, okay, so
Yeah, I
look, we
think you're
spent,
correct on that. Yeah,
yeah.
where does it go?
So if you look at state, local, and federal spending for education in Illinois, we spend $8,000 more per kid than Indiana does. We spend $8,000 more per kid than Florida does, taking all spending, and yet they have the same results that we do. So what is that extra 8,000 for? Part of that is pensions. Part of that is the school districts I mentioned. Think about it. When you take a school district, every one of them have the superintendent, not everyone, I have to back. Many, especially the big ones, have superintendents, assistant superintendents, the bookkeepers, the lawyers, the accountants. Next thing you know, you've got this massive bureaucratic monster, and they're duplicated everywhere. And that happens. I live in the North Shore of Chicago. We have massive bureaucracies, very expensive. Everybody makes $300,000 a year or more. When you talk about superintendents, so massive salaries, massive pensions, and then because they make a lot, well, guess what? Everybody else starts making a lot. Take Dalton. Everybody knows Dalton, Illinois, because of the famous mayor that made a mess there. Has made a mess there. Their school superintendent makes 450 grand a year. And I think the reading level, the percentage of kids who can read at grade level is like 15%. So again, I wish everybody could make 450,000, but the average Illinoisan does not. And yet we're paying for that superintendent to make 450,000. Let me give you some more. We got double dipping. We still do double dipping. The superintendent in my neck of the woods recently retired at 56, 58, and full pension. And now he's working, they're allowed to work half-time to start drawing his salary again. So we allow double dipping like that. We still have salary spiking. We've talked about this for years. In contracts, government workers, many of them are, when they say they're going to retire, the last 5 years they get automatic 5% raises. It's a 25% bump at the very end, which of course makes salaries higher, but it also then says pensions are boosted, right? So this is the kind of stuff that we do. And look, everyday Illinoisans who are in Southern Illinois on the west side of Chicago, they don't get salary spiking. They don't get to do double dipping. They don't get $450,000 public sector salary. So we have a big disconnect between everyday Illinoisans who pay the tax bills and those who are part of the system that benefit from it. And we can't operate when our public sector is so expensive. Guess what? People will just keep leaving, and that's the way it is.
No, yeah, I agree. And recently, you've talked recently about I've seen in the press about pensions.
Mhm.
Could you maybe talk a little bit about what Illinois needs to do with our pension system?
Mhm. Yeah, so that's a big thing. And I mentioned Warren Buffett earlier. Warren Buffett said he's not going to invest in Illinois, and so my gosh, so if you line up all 50 states and look at pension debts, we are the outlier in the country. We're the biggest mess, and that there's so much pension debt we don't know what to do with it. It's why we have the lowest credit, call it credit score in the country. So here's what I think, right? It's constitutionally protected, so it's really difficult to make any changes on that unless we have an amendment put on the ballot and Illinois say, hey, we'll make some reforms to the pensions. And that's going to be tough to do because supermajorities in Democrats. But here's something we can do and we should do, and I think it's something I would lead, and it would make a big statement to the rest of the country. And it's this: we will no longer keep digging a bigger hole with more pension debt. And to do that, going forward for new workers, which is constitutional, be a new contract between a new worker and the state or local governments. Let's go to 401ks for new government workers. It's the same type of 401k style plans that we all have in the private sector. So it's fair. It's fair for the private sector who has to pay for them, and it's fair that we're all getting the same benefits. But I also argue, so anyway, that's a huge change because we would send a signal to the rest of the country. We are not going to keep digging that pension hole. We have stopped it, and here we have something new. That's number one. Number two, I also argue it's much better for our government workers to have their own control over their own retirements. If you look at, and this is what worries me, I'm a huge fan and supporter of the Chicago police, right? We should really support our policemen. Their pension funds have only 18% of the money in them that they should have. Instead of having the 100% of whatever number that should be, it's only at 18%. Those things run the risk of going bankrupt. Why do we require our policemen or any government worker for their retirement security to be dependent on a bunch of politicians who have failed them, whether it's Lori Lightfoot or Rahm Emanuel or Mike Madigan or Ed Burke? Why should their retirements be dependent on the policies of many corrupt politicians? They shouldn't be dependent on me. So we should give them control over their own retirements. Those retirements should be portable. It's their money and not the politicians' money, which is what it is today. So I think it's a huge way to start getting change in Illinois on that.
No, yeah, I totally agree that not only it's fair, I mean, it's reality.
Well,
Everyday workers, like you just said, we have 401ks. We don't have a pension system. That's,
yeah.
the past.
I mean, the dream would be that we all had pensions, we had tons of money, but the reality, and look, in 401ks, look at the markets. They've done amazing. So people are doing well with their 401ks.
Yeah, if you want, unless you want to talk about the Biden years, but that's a whole other
But, I mean,
conversation.
but the markets went up, right? Yeah, but sure.
Yeah, that's true. So, with the talk of, everything going up, property taxes being an issue in Illinois, I believe another issue that Illinoisans deal with is utility prices. Um,
Oh boy.
yeah, electric, gas. There's been a lot of recent increases, rate increases through the ICC and stuff like that. Um, what do you feel about, I kind of look at like this is like a good policy, bad policy type question. So, kind of more on the CEJA legislature. Do you
Mhm.
think that's good policy, or do you think that's kind of bad policy?
Well, I think the CEJA policy was horrible policy. Look, I'm all for innovation, and the greener we can make our energy, the better, right? The consumption. However, that should only happen when the green energy is ready, it's reliable, it's not subsidized, and we can count on it. And today we can't. And CEJA, which is of course the green energy bill that was passed, was a horrible bill because what it did is it mandated that we start shutting down our coal, start shutting down our natural gas, and rely on green energy that's not reliable. And that's the problem. So now we're seeing that the green energy has not been reliable. We've shut down our base load of energy. And so now to make things work, we're having to go buy energy from other states, pay spiking prices, and now we're passing much higher costs on to our people. What a mess. Look, leave our great energy sources already that are here, leave them alone until you have something new and reliable. You don't start cutting off your source before you're ready, and that's what they've done. It's been a huge mess. And so what I will do is I'll roll back and I will fight. Of course, again, everything is going to be a battle. I will fight to roll back CEJA, get rid of those mandates, and say, come talk to us when you're ready with competitive competitive pricing on green energy, reliable, connected to the grid, right? Then we can talk. But you don't start forcing we loss of jobs, right? That's a big deal. I was down at the Nighthawk coal facility just a couple months ago. It's amazing. Um, you know, we're creating we're digging out all this coal and then we're sending it to other states rather than using it right here in Illinois. It makes no sense. So anyway, I would start unwinding that, and let's protect our great sources of energy here, protect our jobs, and and the green energy when it's ready, then we'll consider it, but only then.
Right. And recently too, there's the governor just signed I can't remember they love to put fancy acronyms to all these
Yeah,
things too. So recently they just signed
and sorry, not just fancy, but not truthful acronyms, right?
that.
Because safety act, not safe, for example.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But you know where I'm getting with that. So recently they just signed more, energy policy in with the whole battery storage thing. And I read something that was like $7 billion is
Yep.
what it's gonna cost
Yeah.
Illinoisans. And it's like, man, we pay all this money into it and then we still get, those high electric bills. It's like what gives and again, like, is this something that maybe Illinois just needs to keep their hands out of? Or is it, just, again, is it bad policy that we need to look into and we need to, line item by line item and rewrite it or just take it out?
Yeah, well, so it's the same failed policy. So what we just said is that they're not able to bring reliable green energy, which they forced us to do with the CEJA. And so now because they failed, they say, oh, those wind and solar aren't providing the right amount of energy. It's too up and down. So they're saying, so now we need to buy $7 billion in batteries to bail out their failed policy. So here we go, $7 billion in batteries to store energy so that we can avoid the spikes. We'll see. Now we're going to pay another price for their failure. And instead of forget the 7 billion in batteries, wait till you have a real process. Let's go back to our core. Let's get natural gas going again. And of course, let's work on nuclear. Let's start nuclear. It takes a long time to get nuclear going, but let's work on it. Haven't seen that happen yet either. So
Yeah.
bottom line is they're not being honest about the problems. They're just saying pay more, 7 billion more.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. It's it's just it's an ask. It's keep giving. It's like beating the dead horse. It's
Yeah.
and something's got to give. But you kind of brought elaborated more on the whole. They love to use these fancy words for labeling their laws. Another one is the Safety Act. Recently, a couple months ago, very famously, unfortunately, I hate to really say it like kind of like that, but it was all over international news. That girl that was lit on fire on the CTA, and I believe that man had like 72 prior arrests.
That's
Like,
right.
so
10 felonies.
yeah, unbelievable. And he's not really the only one. He's like kind of the big one that kind of made it. But what's going on with the Safety Act? What do we do with that?
Get rid of it. And there's nothing else to say. I strongly opposed it. I worked with a lot of people when at Wire Points we were exposing how bad it was. It allowed even more types of crimes to avoid being held in jail pre-trial. So we put them back on the street. It ended cash bail, which is another way to hold bad guys accountable while they're awaiting pre-trial. It made a mockery of our system, and as an experiment too. No other state in the country had gone to no cash bail 100%. And look, everybody opposed it who was outside of Chicago. Cook County, Chicago, and Lake County, the two district attorneys that opposed it. But across the country, across the state, everybody opposed it. It has to be gotten rid of. Just gotten rid of. We need to bring back law and order, and that's all I can say. Get rid of the Safety Act. Period.
No, I really agree, and and to be honest with you, I feel like a lot of sheriff departments, like you kind of said,
Oh yeah.
will agree with you too. Here recently, I've kind of been trying to do a little bit of a series of highlighting a lot of departments that have been, speaking against that. And,
Hmm.
and recently, I think it was like Representative Coffey had Sangamon County's sheriff and the district attorney in there speaking, that this Safety Act, it does not include every single felony here,
No,
people.
it does. No, it does not.
Yeah,
It does not. Yeah.
and that's what a lot of people don't understand here is it's like a very soft on crime type bill, and it's we are a country of law and order, and that's just how it is.
Well, we have to remember that the Chicago legislators that passed all this, right, largely Chicago, they're decarcerationists. They don't, they would much rather the jails be emptier. And so this is part of the problem is that they have no problem. The prosecutors too, right? We've got prosecutors who don't prosecute, and judges who don't sentence. And so people are getting arrested. The police take risk. They take life risk. They take reputational risk. Right now, we know that if you're going to arrest somebody, you're going to have all these cameras and take reputational risk. They hand over somebody to the prosecutors. Same day, they're back out. What a uh, morale killing work that these prosecutors and judges do. They're not helping the police who do amazing work.
No, yeah, I really agree, and it's it's I hate to say it, but it's just it's a spit in the face to those people who put their lives on the line every day because they don't know what they wake up to when they put that on, and if they're even going to be able to come home and take that vest off. So, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
it's it yeah,
yeah,
it's a
and for me,
disgrace.
it's a disgrace. And if we learned anything from the COVID and the George Floyd and all that is, what Brandon Johnson, what Lori Lightfoot, what others have done, Pritzker, they haven't defended the police. They left the police exposed, abused. It's horrific what they've done to police morale. And so, as governor, I will do everything. The starting point for public safety is boost the morale back up. We have their back. We're going to support them because they need support. This is you realize how special they take risk every day. Things that we can't understand as normal residents who don't do that kind of work. So that's key. Point number one is that.
No, yeah, I totally agree. I think, there's no and if or buts about it. I think, we just need to go back to enforcing the law, and that's
Hmm.
it. The Safety Act has to go. It's really been putting a bad damper on our communities, and it shows that we have too many people that are living proof.
And here's what's fascinating. I've been doing this work, and the traditional media just keeps ignoring it. Chicago has led the country for, we just finished the 14th year in the row with the most murders. Most murders. And people say, oh, well, yeah, we're a big city. Yeah, but so is New York City. So is Los Angeles. They're much bigger than we are. They have fewer murders. In fact, if we had the same murder rate, right? So if we had the same murder rate as New York City, so per 100,000, how many murders per 100,000? If we had the same murder rate as them, today we'd have fewer than 100 murders. And that's a phenomenal drop from 400 now to 100. So we have a long way to go to becoming a safe city. And Brandon Johnson and his peers won't let this be a safe city, and Governor Pritzker won't either. That's why they need to be replaced. If we come back to, if you want change in Illinois, you have to get rid of them. You have to give Republicans a chance.
No, yeah, I totally agree. And, that's something that a lot of people don't understand either is, Illinois is very special because it's been controlled by Democrats since the 90s. So,
Yeah.
like you kind of just said, and like we talked about a little bit before we first started doing this, is, it's time to give Republicans a little bit of a chance here. Like, what do we got to
Yeah.
lose, people?
Right. I mean, yeah, well, right. And not just for the governorship, but for the state house. Give Republicans a chance. Um, you know, what have you got to lose? Exactly right.
No, I agree. So, to talk a little bit more about kind of policy, I kind of, feel like that's your thing here. Let's talk a little bit about the Sanctuary Act with Illinois, Sanctuary State. Sorry. And recently there's been a lot in the news. Illinois had its issues too when ICE was here. Um, what is Illinois doing wrong with the sanctuary status, and how, and well, not really how, but how they don't cooperate with the
Yeah.
federal government?
Yeah, I mean, this is the whole issue is that we are the problem. Illinois is the problem. Chicago is the problem because we're a sanctuary state and a sanctuary city. And not only that, we're a welcoming city. Governor Pritzker passed billions of dollars to welcome even more illegal immigrants. And you can imagine with when you let in so many illegal immigrants and you're a sanctuary state, sanctuary city, where meaning that local officials won't cooperate with federal authorities, then you are a sanctuary for criminals as well. And that's the big problem. So we're creating the mess because we won't cooperate with federal authorities. You take a state like Florida, you take a state like Tennessee, you take a state like Indiana. Guess what? Their local law enforcement must, their law, like especially like DeSantis, he passed a law. Local enforcement must cooperate with federal authorities. So if there's a bad guy in the jail, guess what? The federal authorities go to the jail. Florida local officials hand over the bad guy in handcuffs, and it's over. There's no ICE chasing. There's no criminals on the streets. What do we do in Illinois? We do the exact opposite. Our laws are the exact opposite of Florida's. In Illinois, local law enforcement is prohibited from working with federal officials. And so guess what happens? A bad guy finishes his sentence in the local jails. He goes out to the streets. And then we're forced, not we, the federal government, ICE agents are forced to go chase that guy down. That creates all kind of chaos and mess. I don't like that chaos and mess in our streets. I don't want it. I would end it. And the way I would end it is saying we will now cooperate with federal authorities. Federal authorities, come to the jail. We'll hand you the bad guy. Please take him peacefully. That's one. The second thing that Pritzker makes a mess with is listen to him. What does he call federal law officials? These are people enforcing federal law. He calls them jackbooted thugs. He calls them Nazis. He calls them racists. He calls them terrorists. And guess what he's doing? He's fomenting a bunch of people to go out on the streets and take on the federal authorities, which creates more chaos. When I'm governor, I don't do that. I support federal law enforcement. We hand over the bad guys, so we end the chaos on the streets and we end the fomenting and the incitement and the incendiary language. End it, be done. And that's what we have to do.
No, I definitely agree with that. The language here that he puts out to the public, it's not doing no justice. And
Mhm.
to belittle, uh, an agency, a federal government, and then you know eight. I'm kind of drawing a blank here on the law, but the uh, illegal entry into the United States, that's nothing new here. This has been a law on the books for a long time. So for them to
Right.
just, Pritzker himself, I believe, if I'm not wrong here, he is a lawyer. So to, just act like that's not a law, and you're a lawyer here, like what's going on? It's, to me, it's definitely political talking points, something to talk on, something to cause a stir and, unfortunately run on. But, you know,
Right.
um,
Well,
recently,
in
I
fact,
even saw something too, like um, there was something like a report of like there was a organization that gets federal tax or not federal tax dollars, state tax dollars to fuel, and they fuel those protests out in the city and stuff like that. I think the
yeah,
RRCC or something like that.
so there's money going to NGOs. You think that these non-governmental organizations, you think they're doing good philanthropic work. You read it, and it says we're here to oppose ICE. We're here to do all. They will take on. We're spending tax dollars to give it to not-for-profit groups who are opposing enforcement. That's not how we should be using our money as a state. Certainly, many people would not want their money spent that way. So, yes.
Yeah, it's a very disturbing manner there. And obviously, with all the, like you said, the Safety Act, not just allowing the federal governments to simply come into the jail, think about that. It could be something so simple to where we wouldn't have, it's really a waste of resources. Now you got, for instance, the federal government's got to go drive through Cicero and go down this street or that avenue, and hopefully they pull up and find the, this is just assumption, but pedophile or these are
Right.
bad, nasty people that should not be here. Like, why would we want these people to be here? That's my hard question
Well,
for the Democrats when they're out there and they're trying to stop them from arresting these people. These are nasty people.
These are criminals. These are people who've done horrible crimes. And the question is going to be, if we're letting them out, and if ICE can't get them, then who's going to get them? And does Pritzker, is he happy with the pedophile or the rapist or the murderer being here? Who's going to get them? Right? Is the press, is the Chicago Tribune going to go catch those guys? Heck no. So we want these criminals out. I want these criminals out. Most people want the criminals out. But the way the rhetoric goes, the way that Pritzker, who of course is running for president, that's why he's willing to attack Trump. He's willing to lean on this sanctuary policy because it suits him presidentially, not because it's the right thing to do. Um, this is why we need to unwind this, and of course, this is why we need to remove Pritzker from office.
No, yeah, I totally agree. It's really just free clout, to be honest with you. And I like, kind of like you said, it's, everything he kind of talks on too. If you really listen to the guy, you don't really hear much about Illinois or
Yeah,
for Illinoisans. You always
mhm,
just hear Trump,
yeah.
and to me it's just like that's him propping up his presidential term. So,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah, and what's really sad, I did a ad during the Bears Packers game, supporting a gentleman named Joe Abraham. He's an angel dad. He lost his daughter to an illegal immigrant down in Urbana. That illegal immigrant was drunk, uh, here illegally, of course, fake license, fake, whatever. He wasn't who he said he was. He slams into the back of Joe's daughter's car, Katie, at 78 miles an hour. She dies, and nobody cared about that. Pritzker's never reached out to Joe Abraham, to the family, and said anything about that, right? Abraham will say, I mean, Pritzker will say everything about Trump, et cetera, but will he ever reach out to Joe Abraham and acknowledge the failure of the sanctuary status that has harbored a criminal like the one that killed Joe Abraham's daughter? No.
Yeah, and there's a lot too. Joe Abraham, his story is very sad, and uh, these policies affect people, like, they affect everybody. These people are, their daughters, their nieces, their nephews, their
Yeah.
grandmas, grandpas. These people are humans, and these policies are, they're affecting families.
Yeah, and what's key is that these are preventable crimes. It's one thing for U.S. residents who live here and they do a crime. Well, we can't stop that. They're residents. They live here. We want to stop it. But when we invite illegal immigrants, those are preventable crimes because if we didn't have all this sanctuary status policies, we capture them, then we prevent the crime, and that's the difference. Joe's daughter didn't have to be killed if we had not harbored this criminal.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. To kind of switch subjects here a little bit. Recently, I think the Trump administration kind of called on. I think there was some election issues, and I think a Judicial Watch even has like Illinois in court over election issues. Um, you know, what do you think about Illinois' elections here? Because for me, I think it's very kind of special how Illinois has been ran by a majority of Democrats for a long time. Do you think maybe Illinois needs to be a little bit more transparent with their how they run their elections?
Oh, I tell you, I dream of massive transparency on elections. It should be that way for everybody. I don't care if you're on the left, the right, Democrat. It doesn't matter. We should be so transparent about what we do. Now, of course, my dream would be get back to election day voting, get back to paper ballots. Right. That's my dream. Unfortunately, right now we don't operate in that space. Right. We got to do vote by mail and early voting and all that. It's a mess. And of course, in Illinois, we're allowing ballots to be counted 2 weeks after election day, which is crazy. And luckily, um, in that recent Supreme Court case, the people suing got standing. So we're going to see maybe a lot of good movement on election integrity. But yeah, I mean, again, as governor, I would do everything I can. I love transparency. Anybody who knows my work loves the facts, and we got to lay the facts out there so everybody can trust it. And whoever opposes that, of course, is they're the bad guys because why would you be against transparency in an election? And then we should hold them accountable.
And the Democrats, like we kind of just said before, is they love using those glossy words, that this is our most sacred right. If it's so
Right.
sacred, then
Democracy.
cherish it that way. Give us our transparency.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's use an ID, right? Let's make sure that everybody who votes is legitimate. And we'll help anybody who doesn't have an ID. We'll help them get it. It's like, and everybody has an ID. So,
Yeah, we are now 2026 here. Technology is so advanced, we can get it figured out. I think Illinois even just said, made it now to where you can even get your stuff digitalized now. So come on, we could probably figure this out.
right.
But kind of to wrap it up a little bit here, I kind of want to ask you, with coming, this is just the primary, candidate here, going up into this election by March 17th, and then obviously we have until November. What do you say to maybe Illinoisans who maybe might be on the fence, who may really are just kind of just tired of the, like I've said, and people who watch my, come to my channel and stuff like that and read my content,
Mhm.
we have Democrat issues here who might be tired of the Democrat policies and, maybe willing to give Republicans a chance. But what would you say to people who might be a little bit on the fence or really undecided? Like, who do I vote for? What do I do? Like, I'm ready to change. I don't want to leave Illinois, but I want something to start going in a different
Mhm.
direction.
Yeah. So I would say for me, I've got my opponents who are in the Republican Party. I'm the one that's building the coalition. I'm building the best coalition, the biggest coalition. I started out by raising funds uh, from the Chicago financiers, I'd call them the centrist reformers, right? We need Chicago business leadership. They don't like what they're seeing. They don't like what they're seeing from Johnson. They don't like what they're seeing from Pritzker. Guess what? A whole bunch of them supported me with pretty good money. That's a great start. Then I got some really good donors from downstate. One that was previously with Bailey, one of his major donors, now with our campaign. And Dick Uline, the biggest conservative donor in Illinois, was with Bailey before, now with our campaign. So I've helped build an infrastructure. If we're going to beat Pritzker, we have to have a donor base, and I have to prove that I can raise money, and I've done that, and more so than any of the other candidates. The other big thing is, of course, getting endorsements from all kinds of different groups. And that's important too. So Illinois Family Institute, for example, or Illinois Family Action, the pro-life, pro-family group, just endorsed us. They were with Bailey last time, but now with us. So that's another good pickup. So a bunch of different leaders across the state are endorsing our work and our campaign, as well as the Peoria, for example, the Peoria County Republicans endorsed our campaign, but also the Northwest suburbs were getting endorsements from there. So we are showing that we have the appeal for all of the state. And the last thing I'd say is this is key. Whoever's going to beat Pritzker has to do really well in Cook County and the suburbs. I'm from Cook County. My running mate, Dr. Carrie Mendoza, who's an ER physician, works in the safety net hospitals. We're both from here, so that's a key asset. Another big thing for me I'm doing is, given my half Hispanic, I'm speaking in Spanish in the churches, trying to bring across the conservative Hispanics who don't like what they see from Pritzker, the stuff in schools, right? These are conservative Hispanics. They want school choice. Come on with us. I'm speaking to the Polish community. I've been in the Polish press and doing Polish ads. They understand that I represent that move from that freedom that they escaped from their communist countries, whether it was Ukraine or Poland or Romania, Bulgaria. So I'm working to get them. So I can build a coalition. And just yesterday, I was with Willie Wilson in his home. We did a quick Facebook Live. So the Black community. So I am. He's of course a person who may he's run for mayor in the past in Chicago, trying to build that coalition that nobody else can build. We can do it. I mean, we really can. I think that apathy for Pritzker is at its high. This will be a third term for Pritzker. He's running for president anyway, so he's so far left, he'll never do anything to fix Illinois. So if you have that enthusiasm down for Pritzker, if we can create a coalition, the Dabrowski campaign can do that. We can get to that 50% plus one and take Pritzker out. And then we work for all Illinois. I'm a huge fan of Southern Illinois, Central Illinois. the Chicago area, son of immigrants. I like the little guy fighting his way up. So I'm ready to lead. And I'm excited for it.
That's awesome to hear, Ted. Like we've talked about before we started this, kind of like I mentioned here, Illinois has, I hate to say it for the Democrats. It's unfortunate for them, I guess you could say, but we have a Democrat problem in here in Illinois, and it's time that we just simply just give Republicans a chance. Just it's time we take a
Yeah.
shot on something, because it's like, look at where we're at.
Yeah. I hate seeing people forced to leave. I hate people, they love this state. This is their history. Um, farmers who have generations here. You have people who've been here for a long time. They shouldn't be squeezed out. That's why I say, hey, join us. For us to win, though, we need to have everybody join together. We're running for the people of Illinois. We need to create just a great group. March 17th is the primary. We need all kinds of coalitions to join. We need people to vote in the primary, and we'll work together and make it happen so that you don't have to leave this state, because this is an amazing state. Like I said, we should be a top 5 state for freedom, for opportunity. Let's go. We can do better.
Yes, sir. I totally agree with that. So thank you so much, Ted. I really appreciate you coming on here. And I just want to say too, talking with a little bit of your inside people to kind of arrange all this, they were very communicative. So,
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
hats off to the people that you kind of have helping you on the inside of your campaign. They're doing a
Mhm.
good job, I believe. So, keep up the
Well,
good
thank you for
work,
that.
and maybe we'll talk to you again here soon in the future and see where it goes.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on, and all the best to the people who follow you. So thank you.
Thank you, Ted. God bless.
All the best.